Next section of Unit 1.2, Interdependence, which is all to do with relationships between living things, and this one is energy and food webs. 1.2b. So to begin with, I'd like to do this just to try and get you back in the way of thinking about food webs and how they work. So use that information to construct a food web. And you tend to have producers go at the bottom. Work your way up from there. Okay, press pause. So it should look like this. So down the bottom you would have algae, and then you would have arrows coming out from them, and just make sure that you do have, it's not just straight lines, you've got arrows coming out of the algae. So the arrows show the direction of energy flow. So mussel, limpet and barnacle, they all consume algae. The limpet and the mussel, they are consumed by whelk. Crabs eat whelk. Mussels are also eaten by starfish. And finally, both crab and barnacle are eaten by seagull. Okay, so just a simple, well, relatively simple food web. So a food chain, that would be a food chain there. Algae consumed by mussel, consumed by starfish. The food. For this section, what you want to do is be able to explain the difference between autotrophs and heterotrophs. And then part two, and this is something that people tend to get mixed up, so just be aware of that as we go through it. We've got three terms: gross primary productivity, net primary productivity, and secondary productivity. Also, so another new term, explain what ecological efficiency is. Number 4, state what ectotherms and endotherms are, the differences between them. And number 5, explain why food chains containing ectotherms tend to be longer than those containing endotherms. So first of all, autotrophs, so there is an example of one, and an autotroph is an organism which can make its own food. So more commonly we've called them producers in biology up to this point, but also you can say autotrophs. So then if that's an autotroph, then you've probably been able to work out that a heterotroph is an organism which must consume another organism to gain energy. So you and I are heterotrophs. Okay, so looking at these terms related to productivity, so gross primary productivity, that is a measure of an autotroph's energy uptake is the rate at which it produces biomass in a given area and time period. So it's a bit of a mouthful this, but I suppose a simple way to think of it, if it's the rate at which it produces biomass, if you think about grass and various other plants, they're going to be growing more in the summer, so the rate at which they produce biomass is going to be, their gross primary productivity is going to be higher during the summer. If it was their GPP during the winter, then that would be much lower. So a measure of an autotroph's energy uptake is the rate at which it produces biomass in a given area and time period. So if you look at, say, an ash tree, its GPP would be higher for June than it would be for December because it's carrying out more photosynthesis in June. Okay, so if you've got an undisturbed beech forest, then each tree will be in soil with a unique water and nutrient content and stoniness. However, each tree's GPP will be more or less the same. So this is something which scientists have discovered, which kind of confused them because they thought that they would sort of compete against each other, and some of them would take up more nutrients than the other. However, this is not quite the case. And actually, what they do is they share sugar, so they actually help each other. So they carry out photosynthesis. They take down through the phloem, if you remember your Nat 5 biology, they take the sugar down to the roots and they actually share it. So why might that be? What's the benefit of helping other trees? Why not just try and take all the sunlight and take all the nutrients from the soil. Well, it pays for them to work together because if you have gaps, this is what scientists believe, if there's gaps in the forest, then that means the trees are more likely to um, be damaged if there's high winds and storms. More trees around them offers protection, and also it's more likely that the ground is going to dry out because sunlight will be able to reach the ground. So interesting. These trees will actually they work for the whole community. They will help each other in order to ensure their own survival. But they work as a group. Um, Not known until scientists looked at what was going on in the root systems. This is fairly new science. So here is gross productivity that we talked about, so the rate at which it produces biomass over a given period of time. And here we're looking at dissolved oxygen. So oxygen is produced during photosynthesis. So the more oxygen plants producing, then that indicates the higher the rate of photosynthesis. So you've got gross primary productivity, which is green, and then you've got net productivity, which is blue. And you can see if you increase the light exposed to the plant, then the productivity increases and the dissolved oxygen increases. Now, however, there's a difference between gross productivity and net primary productivity. So if you think about it, the plant is gaining energy by carrying out photosynthesis. It's using that to grow. However, it's also using energy for something. What is that process? What do you remember from biology in the past? If you didn't do biology, that's okay, because I'm going to tell you, but I just wondered if any of you remember. Well, some of the energy which is taken up by the plant during photosynthesis is immediately used for respiration. So respiration is turning glucose into another form of energy, ATP, that allows it to make its cells divide and so on, carry out various processes. So net productivity, or net primary productivity, NPP, is the rate at which an ecosystem accumulates energy or biomass. Okay, so put all the sort of plants and other organisms together, and this is the rate at which the ecosystem accumulates energy. So they've all got to use some energy to survive by carrying out respiration. NPP is what is left over after that. And a simple way to work out NPP is equal to GPP minus the energy used for respiration. We'll go back to this from the previous wee subtopic. So here we've got succession occurring. Primary, because there's no soil at the beginning, and over time GPP and NPP would both be increasing. Obviously there's more living things here, so you'd have higher GPP and NPP than you would at the beginning of succession. This would be, could be a few thousand years before. And just to give you an idea, the kind of differences between different ecosystems. So here's NPP, and of course tropical rainforest, very high NPP values, whereas if you've got areas where there's less life, going all the way down to extreme desert and desert scrub, then you've got very little. Estuaries, you would have higher net primary productivity, and then out in open ocean, where there's going to be fewer living things, plants, then it's going to be lower. Okay, just a little flow chart here, just to kind of, again, try and simplify things a little bit. So GPP is used for some of the energy which is part of gross primary productivity. Some of that's used for respiration. The rest of it becomes NPP, net primary productivity, which is what is going to accumulate within the ecosystem. Now that energy then can be stored. So for example, in tubers, your potatoes, they use some energy for respiration, potato plants, but then they store a lot of it as what we call the tuber underground. Alternatively, it can be used to get bigger, to make the plant bigger, so used for new biomass production, in other words, to grow. And we've been talking about our autotrophs. Remember, we kind of defined autotrophs and heterotrophs at the beginning of this. So to bring heterotrophs into the game, autotrophs allow all this to happen, and then what is stored or what becomes leaves, that is available for consumption by heterotrophs. And when we go into heterotrophs, this is where secondary productivity comes in. So secondary productivity is defined as the production of new biomass in heterotrophs following consumption of the plant's NPP energy, so the energy left over after the plant is respired, or the production of new biomass by consuming other heterotrophs. Okay, so think of gross primary productivity, net primary productivity, they're both related to autotrophs, and secondary productivity is essentially heterotrophs getting bigger because of them consuming energy in one of those two ways. Going thick and fast, the terms are coming here. So ecological efficiency, we can now bring this into the equation. So here is what's called a pyramid of energy. So you've got here 100% of this is photosynthesis being carried out. So 100% of the energy of photosynthesis, only 10% of that gets passed on, then 10% again, and then 10% again. So the initial energy brought in by the plant, you can see by the time it gets to the apex predator, it is reduced quite dramatically. Now, ecological efficiency is related to this. So it is it's a percentage, it's the efficiency with which energy and biomass are transferred between trophic levels. So this is a trophic, each of these is a trophic level, between trophic levels in a food chain. So if you've got a food chain where this number here is 12% getting passed on, that would have a higher ecological efficiency than if 7% was being passed on. Okay, and there's reasons why there might be, this might be 7% in one food chain and 12% in another, which we're going to come on to. So ecological efficiency, the efficiency expresses a percentage with which energy and biomass are transferred between trophic levels in a food chain. So why would energy be lost? So think about this. Organisms use energy for something and something. So what are you using energy for? Other living things using energy for? So respiration and movement. And energy is lost from food webs through heat. So we're producing heat at all times, and also undigested material. Okay, that's a wee Nat 5 biology question there, isn't it? How can energy be lost from food chains? So as a result, ecological efficiency is usually around 10%. Okay, 10% of energy is usually passed on because it's either used for respiration or movement, or lost through heat or undigested material. Now, to think about why some food chains have a higher ecological efficiency than others, we have to look at the differences between endotherms and ectotherms. So this is a cat. It is an endotherm, and what endotherms do is they use internally generated heat to maintain their body temperature, and that's regardless of external temperature. So if you have done higher biology, then you might be thinking about your sort of conformers and regulators here. Okay, so we are endotherms. We can maintain our body temperature. Ectotherms, on the other hand, they are reliant on the external environment for temperature control. So your reptiles that bask in the sun in the morning in order to get their internal temperature up to a temperature at which they can function during the day. Okay, this is a wee Attenborough video. Have a look at this. YouTube, why warm blood is better than cold. Right, so what I've got here is a wee table, and you can sort of split it into two. So here is, on the left-hand side, we've got an endothermic food chain, and here's the producer at the bottom, and this is just units of energy. So you can see the producers had 4,925 units of energy, 249 reached the primary consumer. So I want you to work out the ecological efficiency for that. Same for this, so that would be 17 over 249 times 100. On the other side, we've got the ectotherm food chain, so I want you to work out D, E, and F as well. Okay, so calculate the ecological efficiency between trophic levels in each food chain. Which food chain is the higher ecological efficiency, and give possible reasons why. So press pause and do that. Okay, so here's our values for the endotherms. So the sum there was 249 over 4925 times 100. So we had 5%, and then this one 7%, 3%, whereas the ectotherms, D 11%, E 9%, and F 10%. So which food chain is the higher ecological efficiency? It's the ectotherm, and think about why. So what is it? The difference between ectotherms and endotherms? Why would they be losing? Why would endotherms be losing more energy than ectotherms? Okay, so the reason why for endotherms, if you're internally generating heat, you try to keep yourself warm, that requires a lot of energy. So you've got high metabolic demand. You need to eat more, for one thing. You know about crocodiles would maybe have one meal, a month potentially, whereas mammals need to eat, much more regularly than that. So as a result of that, because you need a lot of energy, that means the ecological efficiency only reaches 7%. Okay, so in order to generate heat requires energy, so you only can pass on about a maximum of 7% in these endothermic food webs. Ectothermic food webs, on the other hand, so you can see some numbers over here, so they don't have to use energy to generate their own heat. Okay, so they're more ecologically efficient. Okay, they can pass more energy on, so they can go up to 15%. So ectotherms up to 15%, endotherms 7%. And this goes back to our learning intention. So as a result of this, your ectothermic food chains, they tend to be longer than endothermic ones. Okay, so the two, looking at these last two slides, you've got this one which has got five living things in it, whereas I think the endotherm one has 4 in it. Okay, so it's all about endotherms having to use energy to generate heat, whereas ectotherms do not. Okay, press pause and try and fill that in. Just the differences between endotherms and ectotherms. Okay, so endotherms, example is cow. They have a high metabolic demand to internally generate heat and maintain body temperature. That's what thermoregulation just meant. What do they do in terms of regulating their body temperature? The energy loss between trophic levels is higher, and ecological efficiency is up to 7%. And the length of food webs in endotherms is shorter. I probably should have said I was looking for a comparison for those ones. Ectotherm, an example is a sea turtle. So their body temperature is regulated by external factors. So the energy loss between trophic levels is comparatively lower than endotherms. As a result, their ecological efficiency is up to 15%, and the length of food webs is longer. And that was quite a lot of that was 18 minutes of me talking there. So have a break and then come back, and then we'll give it a couple of days, and we'll have a look over some of that stuff again. And yeah, okay, stop there. Okay, just part 2 of this. So press pause. Here's the first wee task. So some of the well, I think all of the terms that were used in this wee subtopic. So see if you can match these up. So A, an autotroph is an organism which can produce its own energy. Heterotroph, so A was 2. B, 5, an organism which consumes another to gain energy. C, gross primary productivity is 6, a measure of an autotroph's rate of energy uptake. D, net primary productivity is 4, energy available for heterotrophs to consume. E, secondary productivity is 3, the production of new biomass in heterotrophs. And F, ecological efficiency, is the percentage of energy, it's number 1, the percentage of energy transferred between trophic levels in a food chain. Next, I'd like to try this. So the difference between endotherms and ectotherms. So press press pause. So number 1, an example: cow, human, rat, mouse, tiger, chimpanzee, whatever you like, any mammal basically. Thermoregulation: have a high metabolic demand to internally generate heat and maintain body temperature. For endotherms, the energy lost between trophic levels tends to be higher. Ecological efficiency is up to 7%, that's number 4. And 5, the length of food webs tends to be shorter. For ectotherms, number 6, you could have sea turtle, crocodile, any kind of reptile, iguana. Number 7, the body temperature is regulated by external factors, the heat outside. Number 8 is lower, the energy loss between trophic levels. Their ecological efficiency is up to 15%, and the length of food webs is number 10, longer. Okay, and last little activity to see if you've learned the material in this topic. So in these 3 paragraphs, there are 13 mistakes. I want to go through them, go through it and try and identify them. Okay, press pause and do that. So first one, a heterotroph is an organism which can make its own food. No, it's not. That should be autotroph, organism which can make its own food. So I hope if you haven't put in what the correct word is, press pause and do that before I give you the answers. So an autotroph is an organism which can make its own food, whereas heterotrophs, that should be, have to consume another organism to gain energy. Gross primary productivity, GPP, is a measure of an autotroph's energy uptake as the rate at which it produces seeds in a given area and time period. It's not seeds, that should be biomass. Net primary productivity is GPP minus the energy used to photosynthesize. No, that should be respiration. Tropical rainforests have very low values for GPP and MPP, whereas deserts have very high values. That should be the opposite. So that should be, the first one should be high rather than low, and the second one should be low rather than high. So that's already 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 7 more mistakes. Secondary productivity is the production of new biomass in heterotrophs following consumption of NPP energy or other heterotrophs. Ecological efficiency is the efficiency expressed as a percentage with which energy and biomass are transferred between producers in a food chain. It's not producers, it is the living things, I suppose. Between organisms would be okay in there. Between organisms in a food chain. Organisms use energy for respiration and movement, so on average, only 10% of the energy which enters a trophic level is passed on through the system. 90% of energy leaves the food web as heat or digestible waste. That should be undigestible waste. If it's digestible, then you've got the energy out of it, whereas undigestible, you cannot. An ecological efficiency of 10% limits most food chains to 4 or 5 trophic levels, with biomass typically increasing at each level. That should be decreasing. Okay, so we have 4 to go. Endotherms use internally generated heat to maintain body temperature regardless of external temperature. Internal generation of heat requires a high metabolic demand and energy use, so little energy is available for biomass accumulation. Ectotherms, on the other hand, rely on the external environment for temperature control. Because they don't have to use energy to generate their own heat, ectotherms are less ecologically efficient than endotherms. That should be more. They can pass on up to 20% of their energy. No, that should be 15. 15% of their energy to the next trophic level, whereas endotherms can only pass on up to 10%. That's a wee bit high, 7%. Okay. As a consequence, food webs containing ectotherms, marine food webs, e.g. marine food webs, tend to be shorter than those of endotherms. No, that should be longer for the last mistake there.